welcome to another nighttime reading hour. And this is the Sunday edition, Silly or Surreal Sunday. Trying to think of alliterative titles for each episode, and that's somewhat difficult, but I can always use some help. So if you want to drop me a line in the comments, a name for any of the days that I might use, that's either alliterative and evocative for each day episode. That would be really appreciated. But welcome again to another night of reading from some of your favorite classics. Tonight is, once again, is Surreal Sunday. Silly Surreal Sunday. And we are going to be reading from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. And last time we ended up stopping at chapter 6, and I was saying we were going to move on this time around to chapter 7, which is a mad tea party. Right there? Okay. So that's where we'll begin. So let's get started. A mad tea party, chapter 7. There was a table set out under a tree in front of the house, and the March Hare and Hatter were having tea at it. A dormouse was sitting between them, fast asleep, and the other two were using it as a cushion, resting their elbows on it, and talking over its head. Very uncomfortable for a dormouse, thought Alice. Only, as it's asleep, I suppose it doesn't mind. The table was a large one, but the three were all crowded together at one corner of it. No room, no room, they cried out when they saw Alice coming. There's plenty of room, said Alice indignantly, and she sat down in the large armchair at one end of the table. Have some wine, said the March Hare, in an encouraging tone. Alice looked all around the table, but there was nothing on it but tea. I don't see any wine. There isn't any, said the March Hare. Then it wasn't very civil of you to offer it, said Alice angrily. It wasn't very civil of you to sit down without being invited, said the March Hare. I didn't know it was your table. It's laid for a great many more than 3. Your hair wants cutting, said the Hatter. He had been looking at Alice for some time with great curiosity, and this was his first speech. You should learn not to make personal remarks. It's very rude. The Hatter opened his eyes very wide on hearing this, but all he said was, Why is a raven like a writing desk? Come, we shall have some fun now, thought Alice. I'm glad they've begun to asking riddles. I believe I can guess that, she added aloud. Do you mean that you think you can find out the answer to it? Said the March Hare. Exactly so, said Alice. Then you should say what you mean. The March Hare went on. I do, said Alice hastily. At least I mean what I say. That's the same thing, you know. Not the same thing a bit, said the Hatter. You might just as well say that I see what I eat. It's the same thing as I eat what I see. Well, you might just as well say, added the March Hare, that I like what I get is the same thing as I get what I like. You might just as well say, added the Dormouse, who seemed to be talking in his sleep, that I breathe when I sleep is the same thing as I sleep when I breathe. It is the same thing with you, said the Hatter, and there the conversation dropped, and the party sat silent for a minute, while Alice thought over all she could remember about ravens and writing desks, which wasn't much. The Hatter was the first to break the silence. What day of the month is it? He said, turning to Alice. He had taken his watch out of his pocket and was looking at it uneasily, shaking it now and then and holding it to his ear. Alice considered a little, and then said, the 4th. 2 days wrong, sighed the Hatter. I told you butter would suit the works, added, looking angrily at the March Hare. It was the best butter, the March Hare meekly replied. Yes, but some crumbs must have got in as well, the Hatter grumbled. You shouldn't have put it in with the bread knife. The March Hare took the wash and looked at it grimly. Then he dipped it into his cup of tea and looked at it again. But he could think of nothing better to say than his first remark. It was the best butter, you know. Alice had been looking over his shoulder with some curiosity. What a funny watch, she remarked. It tells the day of the month and doesn't tell what o'clock it is. Why would it? Muttered the Hatter. Does your watch tell you what year it is? Of course not. But that's because it stays the same year for such a long time together. Which is just the case with mine, said the Hatter. Alice feeling dreadfully puzzled. The Hatter's remark seemed to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was certainly English. I don't quite understand you, she said, as politely as she could. The dormouse is asleep again, said the Hatter, and he poured a little hot tea upon its nose. The dormouse shook its head impatiently, and said without opening its eyes, Of course, just what I was going to remark myself. Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter said, turning to Alice again. No, I give it up, Alice replied. What is the answer? I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter. Nor I. Alice sighed wearily. I think you might do something better, she said, than waste it in asking riddles that have no answers. If you knew time as well as I do, said the Hatter, you wouldn't talk about wasting it. It's him. I don't know what you mean, said Alice. Of course you don't, the Hatter said, tossing his head contemptuously. I dare say you never even spoke to time. Perhaps not, Alice cautiously replied, but I know I have to read the time when I learn music. Ah, that accounts for it, said the Hatter. He won't stand beating. Now, if you only kept on good terms with him, he'd do almost anything you liked with the clock. For instance, suppose it were 9 o'clock in the morning, just time to begin lessons. You'd only have to whisper a hint to time, and round goes the clock in a twinkle. 1:30, time for dinner. I only wish it was, the March Hare said to itself in a whisper. That would be grand, certainly, said Alice thoughtfully. But then I shouldn't be hungry for it. Not at first, perhaps, said the Hatter, but you could keep it to 1:30 as long as you liked. Is that the way you manage? Alice asked. The Hatter shook his head mournfully. Not I, he replied. We quarreled last March, just before he was mad, pointing his teaspoon at the March Hare. It was at the great concert given by the Queen of Hearts, and I had to sing. Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder what you're at. You know that song, perhaps? I've heard something like it, said Alice. It goes on, you know, the Hatter continued, in this way. Up above the world you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle. Here the dormouse shook itself and began singing in its twinkle, 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 and went on so long that they had to pinch it to make it stop. Well, I'd hardly finished the first verse, said the Hatter, when the Queen jumped up and bawled out, He's murdering the time, off with his head. How dreadfully savage, exclaimed Alice. And ever since that, the Hatter went on to mournfully tone, He won't do a thing I ask. It's always 6 o'clock now. A bright idea came into Alice's head. Is that the reason so many tea things are put out here? She asked. Yes, that's it, said the Hatter with a sigh. It's always tea time, and we've no time to wash the things between whiles. Then you keep moving round, I suppose, said Alice. Exactly so, said the Hatter, as the things get used up. But what happens when you come to the beginning again? Alice ventured to ask. Suppose we change the subject, the March Hare interrupted, yawning. I'm getting tired of this. I vote the young lady tells us a story. I'm afraid I don't know one, said Alice, rather alarmed at the proposal. Then the Dormouse shall, they both cried. Wake up, Dormouse! And they pinched it on both sides at once. Tell us a story, said the March Hare. Yes, please do, pleaded Alice. And be quick about it, added the Hatter, or you'll be asleep again before it's done. Once upon a time, there were 3 little sisters, the Dormouse began in a great hurry. And their names were Elsie, Lacy, and Tilly, and they lived at the bottom of a well. What did they live on? Said Alice, who always took a great interest in questions of eating and drinking. They lived on treacle, said the Dormouse, after thinking a minute or two. They couldn't have done that, you know, Alice gently remarked. They'd have been ill. So they were, said the Dormouse, very ill. Alice tried to fancy to herself what such an extraordinary ways of living would be like, but it puzzled her too much, so she went on. But why did they live at the bottom of the well? Take some more tea, the March Hare said to Alice very earnestly. I've had nothing yet. Alice replied in an offended tone, so I can't take more. You mean you can't take less, said the Hatter. It's very easy to take more than nothing. Nobody asked your opinion, said Alice. Who's making personal remarks now? The Hatter asked triumphantly. Alice did not quite know what to say to this, so she helped herself to some tea and bread and butter, and turned to the Dormouse and repeated her question. Why did they live at the bottom of the well? The Dormouse took a minute or two to think about it, and then said it was a treacle well. There's no such thing. Alice was beginning very angrily, but the Hatter and the March Hare went shh, and the Dormouse sulkily remarked, If you can't be civil, you'd better finish the story for yourself. No, please go on, Alice said very humbly. I won't interrupt again. I dare say there may be one. One indeed, said the Dormouse, indignantly. However, he consented to go on. So these 3 little sisters, they were learning to draw, you know. And what did they draw? Said Alice, quite forgetting her promise. Treacle, said the Dormouse, without considering at all this time. I want a clean cut, interrupted the Hatter. Let's all move one place up. He moved on as he spoke, and the Dormouse followed him, and the March Hare followed the Dormouse's place, and Alice rather unwillingly took the place of the March Hare. The Hatter was the only one who got any advantage from the exchange, and Alice was a good deal worse off than before, as the March Hare had just upset the milk jug into his plate. Alice did not wish to offend the Dormouse again, so she began very cautiously. But I don't understand. Where did they draw the treacle from? You can draw water out of a water well, said the Hatter. So I should think you could draw treacle out of a treacle well, and stupid. But they were in the well, Alice said to the Dormouse, not choosing to notice this last remark. Of course they were, said the Dormouse. Well in. This answer so confused poor Alice that she let the Dormouse go on for some time without interrupting it. They were learning to draw. The Dormouse went on, yawning and rubbing its eyes, for it was getting very sleepy. And they drew all manner of things, everything that begins with an M. Why with an M? Said Alice. Why not? Said the March Hare. Alice was silent. The Dormouse had closed its eyes by this time and was going off into a doze. But on being pinched by the Hatter, it woke it up again with a little shriek, and went on. That begins with an M, such as mousetraps and the moon and memory and muchness. You know, you say many things are much of a muchness. Did you ever see such a thing as a drawing of a muchness? Really, now you ask me, said Alice, very confused. I don't think. Then you shouldn't talk, said the Hatter. This piece of rudeness was more than Alice could bear. She got up in great disgust and walked off. The Dormouse fell asleep instantly, and neither of the others took the least notice of her going, though she looked back once or twice, half hoping that they would call after her. The last time she saw them, they were trying to put the Dormouse into the teapot. At any rate, I'll never go there again. It's the stupidest tea party I ever was at in all my life. Just as she said this, she noticed that one of the trees had a door leading right into it. That's very curious, she thought. But everything's curious today. I think I may as well go in at once. And in she went. Once more she found herself in the long hall, close to the little glass table. Now I'll manage better this time, she said to herself, and began taking the little golden key and unlocking the door that led to the garden. Then she went to work nibbling at the mushroom. She had kept a piece of it in her pocket, till she was about a foot high, and then she walked down the little passage. And then she found herself at last in the beautiful garden, among the bright flower beds and cool fountains. So that's the end of chapter 7. Only 17 minutes in. So the next chapter is chapter 8, of course, and is the Queen's Croquet Ground. And we're going to leave it there this week because, as some of you may know, it takes a very long time for YouTube videos to upload. Of course, they come on your phones. It apparently took 2 to 3 hours to upload last time, which was only a 25-minute video. So this is 17 minutes. So I'm going to cut it off there, and we'll begin again next week on Chapter 8, the Queen's Croquet Ground. Thank you everyone for listening, and hop in next week for the continuation of Alice in Wonderland. Thank you for popping in, and have a very good evening.